This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Executive order. Good afternoon. Welcome to the broadcast. President Trump set to sign another executive order today, and this one's a big one. He wants to eliminate the U.S. Department of Education. Peter Alexander gets us started from the White House.
President Trump has said his aim is cutting down inefficiency and waste. The impact on American school children could be far-reaching. The Department of Education says it serves more than 50 million students across the country. Democrats and labor unions have argued dismantling the department would be devastating.
I spoke earlier today with Dr. Ralph Kerr at the Teaching and Learning Institute in Houghton, New York. How is this going to change education policy in this country?
Well, I don't think it's going to change a lot. The idea is to dismantle a department and then distribute the work amongst other departments that then would basically just dole out the money directly to the states and let the states handle the education process. We don't need thousands of bureaucrats in Washington telling states and local school districts what they need to do.
Education Secretary Linda McMahon would be tasked with facilitating the closure of the Education Department. Such a move would require congressional approval. President Trump is giving the big three U.S. automakers a one-month extension before tariffs take effect on their imported vehicles. Business analyst Christine Roman.
That announcement from the White House has provided some temporary relief to the American auto companies, but the key word here is temporary. While the administration has signaled there could be other carve-outs, maybe the tariffs for those three countries remain largely in place, with more tariffs expected in a matter of weeks.
Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick says the 25% tax will be removed once and for all once Mexico and Canada get serious about border security.
We need to see the Canadians and Mexicans put long-lasting protections in to protect America. Not this, I'm doing a lot of work for the last 3 weeks. Give me a break.
Democrats argue the tariffs will increase costs for consumers already suffering from inflation. According to one estimate, these tariffs will cost the average American household $1,200 to $1,300 more a year for the goods that they are buying now. President Trump's issued what he calls his last warning to Hamas: release the hostages or be destroyed. Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Enough of this already. These people have been in captivity now for over a year and a half. These are monsters. It needs to stop.
Correspondent Linda Kenyon.
The president posted on Truth Social that he is sending Israel, quote, everything it needs to finish the job. Trump added, again quoting here, release all of the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all of the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it is over for you.
New Jersey Congressman Jeff Van Drew.
Peace through strength, war through weakness. We've had 4 years of weakness. Now we're being strong. We're dealing with the face of evil. We have to be strong, and they better release these hostages immediately.
A 6-week ceasefire between Israel and Hamas expired over the weekend. The U.S. and Ukraine have agreed to meet in the near future to discuss a plan to wind down the war between Russia and Ukraine. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz.
I think we've seen movement in the last 24 hours that the Ukrainian side will actually come to the table and negotiate a partial truce, a full truce, and then a permanent peace.
This week, President Trump withheld all military aid to Ukraine following that dust-up last week in the Oval Office with Volodymyr Zelensky. The Trump administration wants the VA to eliminate tens of thousands of jobs. There are nearly 500,000 employees at the Department of Veterans Affairs right now. VA Secretary Doug Collins.
Right now, VA's biggest problem is that its bureaucracy and inefficiencies are getting in the way of customer convenience and service to veterans.
The White House has instructed the VA to work with DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, to identify which jobs to cut. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson claims illegal immigrants have made his city safer. Johnson among 4 sanctuary city mayors that testified yesterday before Congress.
That law makes sure that the city's police resources are focused on our local priorities. Chicago's Welcoming City Ordinance and our other laws and policies do not lead to more crime.
Border czar Tom Homan.
Look, he's ignorant, and these mayors just don't get it. President Trump made a promise we're going to prioritize public safety threats and national security threats. That's exactly what we're doing.
Also testifying at that hearing, the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, who vowed to cooperate with federal authorities.
To be clear, a sanctuary city classification does not mean our city will ever be a safe haven for violent criminals. It also does not give New York City the authority to violate federal immigration laws.
Tom Homan says sanctuary city policies are dangerous.
There are some collaterals, and why is that? Because people like the mayor of Boston, the mayor of Denver, they don't let us arrest a bad guy in the safety and security of county jail where the officer's safe, the alien's safe, the community's safe. They release him in the community. So we got to go to the community and find him. And when we find that bad guy, if he's with other illegal aliens that aren't a criminal threat, but they're in the country illegally, they're going to.
Since President Trump took office, 30,000 illegal immigrants have been deported from this country. The U.S. House voting today to censure the Texas Democrat who disrupted President Trump's joint address to Congress on Tuesday.
The chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
Democrat Al Green became the first member of Congress ever ejected from a presidential address when he heckled and shook his cane at the commander-in-chief. It's that time of year. Spring breakers are on the move.
Many spring breakers are jetting off to the Sunshine State this year.
We're seeing warm weather destinations in Florida are the most popular for American travelers, whether it be Tampa, Miami, Fort Lauderdale.
Hopper lead economist Haley Berg says prices for hotel rooms and flights are a little higher right now compared to 2024.
Airlines have cut back on capacity at the same time that costs have gone up for the entire travel industry.
TSA says the busiest spring break travel days will be Fridays and Sundays.
Wendy Gillette reporting. Still to come on the Noon Report. Shapiro says tariffs will hurt farmers. Day 18 of the prison guard strike and landfill controversy in Seneca Falls.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams. The thaw is through. The chill is back. Your forecast is up in 10.
All right, Kev, we'll see you then. We do have a flood warning in effect until 9 tonight for Cayuga County in central New York. If you live in Locke, Moravia, Cascade, or near the Fillmore Glen State Park, you will be underwater for several more hours. Flooding happening right now in Cayuga County. No end in sight to the prison guard strike in New York. 8,000 corrections officers at 32 prisons statewide remain on the picket lines. Union boss Matt Keogh says there's no trust right now between the union and the striking workers.
Our union membership has no faith in us right now, and they don't believe that the stuff we presented during mediation was their voices. When it was.
Today marks day 18 of the so-called Wildcat strike. National Guard troops continue to fill in for the striking workers. Governor Hochul says those on the picket lines face arrest if they don't return to the job soon. Conservative activist and former U.S. Senate candidate Joe Pinion says the striking workers are taking great risk to fight for what's right.
I saw mothers weeping on the shoulders of their teenage sons. I saw women who were pregnant standing outside in the cold, not having any health insurance and hoping they didn't get the flu as they tried to have Kathy Hochul hear their cries. This is not something that should be happening in New York.
The guards say they will not return to work until safety and staffing issues are rectified. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's concerned new tariffs imposed by the Trump administration will have a negative impact on farmers in his state.
Our Pennsylvania dairy farmers sell more product to Mexico than any other state. So when you are a Pennsylvania farmer trying to sell your milk or your cheese to Mexico as a result of the president's tariffs, our products now cost more in Mexico, which means Mexicans are going to buy less product from Pennsylvania or maybe no product at all.
But Pennsylvania Congressman Dan Muser and Lloyd Smucker argue America's been taken advantage of for too long, and these tariffs are the only way to change that.
I do understand and appreciate that we need reciprocity and that we've been taken advantage of over the years. We just have.
I think you're going to see benefit from the tariffs that he's imposing and also the tariffs that he's threatening to impose.
President Trump says the tariffs tariffs will ultimately strengthen, not weaken, the U.S. economy. But Governor Shapiro isn't so sure.
I don't know why he did it, but we're going to see a real effect of his policies, and the effect is going to be higher prices for Pennsylvanians.
Pennsylvania's junior U.S. Senator Dave McCormick.
We'll have to see how this plays out. We'll be watching very carefully to make sure if this has a significant negative effect on pricing. I think there's lots of reasons to believe that might not happen. It didn't happen last time, but the president will be able to adjust. I know he's very sensitive to prices and making sure that working families can afford the things they need.
Some business analysts are predicting that gas prices could soar by as much as 30 cents a gallon as soon as next week. Onondaga County, New York executive Ryan McMahon says the $100 billion Micron deal is not going anywhere, despite the potential repeal of the CHIPS Act. That local leader says it is full steam ahead with building a new computer chip manufacturing plant near Syracuse. McMahon says the president's call for repeal of the CHIPS Act will in no way impact Micron. That project expected to bring up to 50,000 jobs to central New York. Seneca Falls, New York voted this week to keep its controversial landfill operational, much to the chagrin of many local residents like Ed Jerkowitz, who tells WSYR,
it's things like this which basically is destroying the ability for this area to become a cultural center, because who's going to want to stay in a cultural center that smells basically like a sewer?
That vote, however, may not stand because hours after it was taken, it was invalidated on a technicality. The state will ultimately have the final say on the fate of the Seneca Meadows landfill. It is the largest landfill in the state of New York, taking in some 2 million tons of waste every year. 75% of that waste is trucked in from the outside. Pennsylvania is spending more than $10 million to replace its electronic voter registration database known as SURE. Secretary of State Al Schmidt says a new civics system should be ready to roll in time for the 2028 presidential election. Schmidt would not say if the new civics system is more reliable than SURE, but he noted that county election leaders have been complaining for a while now that it's time for an upgrade. 7 suspects accused in the torture and murder of Sam Nordquist near Canandaigua, New York. Those suspects now face first-degree murder charges. The accused were indicted yesterday by an Ontario County grand jury. Police say these heinous individuals may have forced children to participate in their crimes.
Sam deserves to have this story told in its entirety. Sam was beaten, assaulted, sexually abused, starved, held captive, and we cannot make sense of that.
Pure evil, in other words, says Ontario County DA Kelly Wolford. She adds Nordquist was treated like a dog by the alleged assailants. An Indiana County, Pennsylvania man has been arrested and charged with orchestrating an elaborate porch pirate ring. Cops say this guy stole packages and then put them up for sale on Facebook. Family Life's Brian Query.
Troopers said they found numerous stolen packages at the home of John D. Manning. During an interview with police, he admitted to numerous porch thefts spanning 2 months. Manning is charged with organized retail theft, receiving stolen property, theft, and related offenses. He's being held at the Indiana County Jail on $150,000 bail, and a preliminary hearing is set for March 11th. Brian Query, Family Life News.
All right, Brian, thank you very much. Let's pause next, switch gears, talk sports. It's the 2-minute drill on Family Life.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Bob, the New York Rangers dropped a 3-2 decision to the Washington Capitals at the Garden last night. The Blue Shirts had a 1-goal lead entering the third period, but the Caps tied it up. And with less than a minute left in the overtime period, Tom Wilson found the back of the net. The Rangers' 2-game winning streak and shutout streak is over. In Washington's win, Alex Ovechkin was the guy who tied things up in the third, scoring his 885th career goal. He is now just 9 goals away from tying Wayne Gretzky's record. In another overtime contest, the Senators edged the Blackhawks 4-3. Vegas down Toronto 5-2. Vancouver got past Anaheim 3-2. And in a shootout, the Kings fell to the Blues by a 3-2 score. On the hardwood, Peyton Pritchard had a career night for the Boston Celtics. He scored 43 points, knocking down 10 three-pointers. And hold on, not to be outdone, Derek White also had a career night. He scored 41 points, making 9 three-pointers. Pritchard and White became the first Celtic duo to score 40 or more points in the same game, and the first duo in NBA history with 9 or more three-pointers in the same game. And talk about stepping up when the C's needed it. Jason Tatum, Drew Holiday, and Kristaps Porzingis were all unavailable for the game. Oh yeah, the Celtics won the game 128-118 over Portland. High scorer for the night, however, went to James Harden of the Clippers. He had 50, leading LA over Detroit 123-115. Other winners, the T-Wolves, Cavs, Wizards, Bucks, and Thunder. That is a look at sports.
Thank you, Randy. Still to come on the Noon Report for Thursday. Trump order on Education Department. Tariffs delayed for auto industry. And celebrating milk's perfect complement.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stone Street. Well, among the many attacks on the rights of parents in recent years, the National Institute of Health placed sexually confused youth under the care of so-called transgender and gender minority mentors. The Department of Defense promoted trans ideology to elementary-age school kids on American military bases. A federally funded 4-H group instituted a policy to assign sleeping arrangements in an overnight camp based on a child's so-called gender identity, and did that without notifying parents. And that's just a few of the ways that government officials, medical professionals, and educational activists maneuvered legally to have the final word over and above parents. Well, thankfully, there's now a reprieve from this onslaught on family rights, an open window of opportunity, you might say, to stand up for children and for parents and for families. Even those who are not fans of the Trump administration should be grateful for an executive order signed on the very first day in office, pushing back on radical gender ideology that was being widely promoted and applied by various government agencies under President Biden. As Ryan Bangert of the Alliance Defending Freedom described it, quote, President Trump's new order is clear. It states that it is the policy of the United States to recognize two sexes, male and female. While this seems so obvious that it shouldn't need to be said, it's paramount given the Biden-Harris administration's attempt to include so-called gender identity under the definition of sex. On that front, the executive order specifies that the term sex in federal law refers to, and I quote, an individual's immutable biological classification as either male or female, not any self-asserted gender identity, end quote. That executive order was then followed by others, the most notable of which protects children from experimental medical treatments based on this false ideology. That order was entitled Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation, but multiple outlets refer to it instead as a so-called ban on gender-affirming care. It's amazing that the same thing can be called mutilation by some and care by others. Well-written, clear, thorough, these executive orders have accomplished many things, not least of which is inhibiting state officials and government agencies from pretending to be parents and taking their place. The health and the well-being of children and the recognition of parental rights and protections should not be at the mercy of the electorate. Let's hope we've not entered an era now in which the state redefines from one administration to the next the essential nature of human beings as men and women, or the substance of a child's most important relationship, whether it's with the state or with their parents. Now, Congress can help here if they are willing to act. The Families' Rights and Responsibilities Act, introduced into the Senate by Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina and James Langford of Oklahoma, and into the House by Representative Virginia Foxx of North Carolina, would legislatively secure parental rights to a new degree. As Matt Sharp of the Alliance Defending Freedom described this law, and I quote, the Family Rights and Responsibilities Act restrains federal government overreach by reaffirming the role of parents to guide the upbringing, education, and health care of their children. It also requires federal courts to safeguard parental rights with the same level of protection afforded other fundamental rights like free speech and religion. The government should never intrude on parenting choices just because it disagrees with the parents' viewpoints. Now and always, it's parents who know their children best, not the government. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
Thank you, John. Outside next, Kevin Williams.
Here is your family life weather forecast for this afternoon. Blustering and colder, variably cloudy. Areas of snow showers and snow flurries with temperatures that have already peaked and will be slowly dropping. Be blustering cold tonight and tomorrow with variable cloudiness. We'll have some lake effect snow depositing a couple, 3, 4, 5 inches in some spots east and southeast of Lake Ontario, a little elsewhere. Low temps tonight, 20s. High temps tomorrow, 30s to near 40. On Saturday, cold, clouds, bit of sun, and high temperatures in the 30s.
All right, Kevin, thank you. This is the Noon Report. I'm your host, Bob Price. Lots to get to. Thursday, March the 6th, President Trump reportedly set to sign an executive order today that would dismantle the U.S. Education Department.
President Trump has long wanted to get rid of the Department of Education. He promised as much throughout his first term and again in this latest campaign, even recently telling his Education Secretary, Linda McMahon, he wants her to put herself out of a job. McMahon just this week calling it a, quote, momentous final mission as she looks to send education back to the states.
NBC's Peter Alexander, the president, granting the big three automakers a 1-month reprieve from those new 25% tariffs.
The president is giving them an exemption for 1 month so they are not at an economic disadvantage.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says this action is meant to convince Ford, GM, and Stellantis to move all their production overseas here to the States. The tax will remain on Mexico and Canada, much to the chagrin of Ontario Premier Doug Ford.
The only country that's benefiting from the squabble, if you want to call it that, is China. And they're sitting back laughing, watching the two closest friends and allies fight a tariff war.
The White House imposed these tariffs to convince our largest trading partners to do more to fight illegal immigration. President Trump's issued an ultimatum to the terror group Hamas: release the hostages or be destroyed. Lucas Tomlinson at Fox News.
Trump posting on Truth Social, release all the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it is over for you. I am sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job.
CBS's Deborah Patta.
The White House has confirmed the U.S. is in direct negotiations with Hamas for the first time since the group was formed. It said Special Envoy Adam Boehler had the authority to talk to anyone to do what's in the best interest of the American people.
A 6-week ceasefire between Israel and Hamas expired over the weekend. We're learning more today about Mohammed Sharifullah. He's the ISIS soldier arrested this week for that bombing in Afghanistan that claimed the lives of 13 U.S. service members in the summer of 2021.
Sharifullah was captured after Pakistan acted on CIA intelligence and then was transported to Dulles Airport in Virginia. Then charged Wednesday with conspiracy to provide material support for a foreign terrorist organization. In court, he spoke in a soft voice, barely 5 feet tall, and he looked down to the floor frequently, including when the judge told him the charge could lead to life in prison.
Reporter Scott McFarland. President Trump announced the arrest of Sharifullah during Tuesday night's speech to Congress. A village near the North Korean border was mistakenly bombed today by U.S. and South Korean forces. It happened during a joint training exercise.
8 bombs were accidentally dropped from South Korean fighter jets on a civilian village about 20 miles from the North Korean border. They were supposed to hit a training range, but left 15 people with injuries. 2 of them are in serious condition. Now, South Korean officials said that one of the pilots put in the wrong coordinates, but what isn't clear is why a second pilot then dropped bombs as well. South Korea's military says it's suspending all live fire drills while an investigation is carried out.
Correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer in Seoul, South Korea. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs is getting in on the fiscal belt tightening that's going around Washington. VA Secretary Doug Collins.
Now, we regret anyone who loses their job, but we'll be making major changes, so get used to it.
The VA set to eliminate up to 80,000 jobs, or 15% of its total workforce. Collins Allen says a lot of the jobs are redundant or do not serve a purpose in advocating for the needs of America's veterans. For the first time in 15 years, a condemned man in this country will be put to death by firing squad. South Carolina's Brad Sigmund has chosen that method of execution tomorrow. He had a choice of a firing squad, electric chair, or lethal injection. Only 3 firing squad executions have been carried out in this country since 1977. You're plugged into the Noon Report, a Thursday edition on Family Life.
Lent is a 40-day season designed for self-reflection. Our guest today on Faith Under Fire encourages the evangelical movement to do some self-reflection these days. Warren Smith is the president of Ministry Watch. He is a Christian journalist and the author of a new book that he calls a love letter to evangelicalism. Warren, is it fair to say that your prescription is a little tough love for the Christian church?
Yeah, Greg, I think that's a great way to put it, some tough love. You know, there's been a lot of books written lately about people who have, shall we say, deconstructed their faith. They have found problems with evangelicalism or with evangelical Christians that they've come in contact with, and they use that as an excuse to walk away from their faith altogether. My book is not that at all. It is not a book deconstructing my faith or anyone else's faith, but I think it's important for us to acknowledge some problems with the current evangelical movement. These problems are causing people to walk away from the faith. And I think that if we as Christians, as believers, folks who are not deconstructing, not walking away, still believe in Jesus, still believe in the authority of Scripture, are seeing these problems, I think we should acknowledge them and we should repent where repentance is necessary. And I think that will be a very, very powerful testimony to the world and especially to those Christians who have some concerns with the faith, but are not ready, don't want to walk away.
We're talking with Warren Smith, the president of MinistryWatch.com. He's written a book called Love Letter to the Evangelical Church. Help us diagnose the things that are not working the way you describe it, and then what are the fix-it steps?
Yeah, great question. You know, I think a lot of times evangelical Christians focus on morality and they focus maybe even on theology. And listen, trust me, Greg, I think those are both really important. But I think we need to look upstream from both morality and theology and look at some of the underlying assumptions of evangelicalism. I think a lot of Christians think that if our church is getting bigger, if we have more people in the pews and more dollars in our collection plate, that God must be blessing us, that is a sign of fruitfulness. But that's not the way the Bible measures fruitfulness. The Bible measures fruitfulness with language like love and joy and peace and patience and long suffering. In other words, we measure the wrong things. In reality, we've adopted the measuring sticks of a secular materialistic world. And I think that folks that are looking at the church to be something different, and looking at Christians to be what the Bible calls a peculiar people, when they see us using the same measuring sticks as the world uses, I think that's a real problem. We've become folks that are enamored with the next big thing. And I think that as believers, we need to start focusing on community. We need to start focusing on, what we can do in our own homes, in our own churches, and less so on what happens in Washington, D.C. or New York City or, Hollywood or some of the other culture centers of the world.
Warren, let me ask you to respond to something that a friend of mine just said not long ago to me, that a Christian who doesn't have meaningful connections with at least 5 non-churched people probably is not as effective as a Christian as they ought to be.
Yeah, I think that's a really good word. I'm not sure that I would put an exact number on it, but I do think that your friend has it just right. That if we're going to be salt and light, which of course is what Jesus calls us to be, we've got to get out of the salt shaker and into the world. Too often, Christians will kind of get in their own little enclave, and they don't interact with the world except to criticize the world. The best critique of something that has gone wrong is to build something beautiful in its place. In fact, Michelangelo said that when I want to criticize, I make something beautiful. And you don't have to criticize the ugly. All you have to do is put the beautiful down next to it, and everybody can see the difference. Unfortunately, I think what Christians too often focus on is criticizing the ugly rather than building something beautiful that the world will notice and want to be a part of.
The president of MinistryWatch.com is Warren Smith. I'm Greg Gillespie, Family Life News.
All right, excellent feature today. Thank you, Greg. Faith Under Fire comes your way Thursdays during the Noon Report. You can subscribe, listen to, and share this feature, as well as all our original podcasts at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or FamilyLife.org.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. A storm system that brought our region rain and wind, even thunder in some cases yesterday and last evening, is now passing by to our north and east across southeastern Canada. And in its wake, a cold, blustery pattern will return a winter-looking feel to our region these next couple days and nights. For this afternoon, blustering and colder, variably cloudy, areas of snow showers and snow flurries with temperatures that have already peaked and will be slowly dropping. Be blustering cold tonight and tomorrow with variable cloudiness. We'll have some lake effect snow depositing a couple, 3, 4, 5 inches in some spots east and southeast of Lake Ontario. A little elsewhere. Low temps tonight, 20s. High temps tomorrow, 30s to near 40. On Saturday, cold, clouds, a bit of sun, and high temperatures in the 30s.
All right, excellent work. Thank you, Kevin. Finally, Noon chocolate chip cookies take the #1 spot for best cookie in America. But today, we celebrate the runner-up. Here's reporter Bree Tennis.
Pass the milk. Today is National Oreo Cookie Day. 2 chocolate cookies held together by sweet cream filling. How can that be bad? Created in 1912 at the Nabisco Biscuit Company, Americans eat 20 billion of them every year. There's even a Guinness World Record for eating them. Travis Meiserjewski holds the title for eating 14 in 1 minute, 2 seconds. Challenge accepted. I'm Bree Tennis.
Yeah, I think I could beat that. Thank you, Bree. And that's our world. The world we live in. Thursday, March 6th. I'm Bob Price. Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report. Heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.